is a battleship, a German battleship, one of Hitler's best. She cost the Nazis over 4 years building time, several million man-hours of slave labor, and millions of marks. Her firepower might easily spell success for a major task force. Yet this great capital ship can be crippled, even sunk, by a single coordinated torpedo attack. Jawohl, Herr Admiral. Strut while you can. But you know what we're saying is true. Think back a little to the early days of the war. Remember how those British Swordfish torpedo planes attacked your Bismarck? You were mighty proud of the Bismarck, called her unsinkable. But those slow Swordfish launched torpedoes which crippled her, so that British cruisers could catch up and pound her to destruction. And she was finally sunk by another torpedo. This is a B-26, Herr Admiral. We call it the Marauder, or had you heard? Und ja, that's a torpedo being loaded. Then there's the B-25 Mitchell. Both bombers carry torpedoes and carry them at very high speeds. So you see what we've got in store for you. But this is where you get off, Admiral. Against all your gold braid, we're betting a single gold bar. Second Lieutenant Douglas Walsh, fresh out of flying school, is just beginning to bone up on the subject of torpedoes. His instructor's pointing out that while Doug doesn't service the torpedo, it'll help him to know what it is and how it's carried. Now, a torpedo must make a good, clean entry into the water. This is helped by the plywood air stabilizer, which holds the torpedo tangent to its flight path. This is the starting lanyard. When the fish drops away, this cord jerks the starting lever, and things happen inside. The stop bolt on the fuselage, which fits into a hole in the midship section, and the sway bracing hold the torpedo steady against the airplane. The two steel cables fasten to regular bomb shackles in the bomb bay. The cables are released from opposite sides, so the torpedo won't roll. The torpedo is mounted so that it's level, not on the ground, but at your average dropping speed, because its proper entry into the water depends on its being level when released. Now, at the same time the starting lanyard is pulled, the arming wire, well, there isn't any on this exercise head. There's a warhead on that job over there. Let's have a look, because after you've made your practice runs, you'll be toting the TNT. This arming wire keeps the impeller wheel from turning and arming the torpedo in the air, but the wire pulls out as the torpedo drops. And when it hits the water, the spinning impeller arms the torpedo after a 400-yard water run. Now, Doug, before you go and take off with the torpedo, there are 3 important things you want to know about it in advance. 1, what's the model of your torpedo? This will tell you its speed and its load of TNT if it has a warhead. This is a Mod 1, and it's got an exercise head. 2, how's your antifreeze? Both exercise head and water compartment must be protected if you're going to hit freezing temperatures. 3, what's the depth setting? This will tell you whether it's good for the target you catch, so you don't send a fish swimming harmlessly under your prey. This one's set for 10 feet. Okay, that's all out here. The rest of the job is done in the cockpit. First thing inside is to conduct your own pre-flight inspection. In many B-26s, your release handle, which the boys call the pickle, is carried in a pocket behind the pilot's seat. When you want to use it, you plug it into the panel here. Slip it on like this, and the release button is right under your trigger finger. In other B-26s and in B-25s, you'll find the release button on the wheel. For safety's sake, it's a good idea not to plug in the cable till you're ready to make your run. The torpedo control must be pulled out to the notch to put your bomb racks in selective and make your release button hot. And now you want to be sure and check your director. Rotate the speed knob and move the arms, just to be sure they work easily and won't give you any trouble when you're ready to set in your problem. Finally, after turning on the battery switches and the master switch, spin up the director light rheostat to make sure that it and the bulb work. And check the reticle. If the image is clean, bright, and sharp, we're ready to go. And you can turn off the director till we need it. Well, Doug, you're off on your first torpedo run, and there's probably a lot in your mind. It'll help you to think of it all as two big questions. One, how do I fly while I release the fish? And two, how do I know where to release it? As for the first question, how to fly during release, your object is to drop the torpedo so it makes a good, clean entry into the water. Say, Doug, ever seen a diving exhibition? Then you get what we mean by a good, clean entry. But a bad entry can hurt a torpedo, can damage it, or distort its run. Don't let your torpedo perform like this. The most important thing in flying is your speed. You've got to balance a high speed, which increases your protection from fighters and flak, against a slower speed, which improves the accuracy of the torpedo. Also, you must slow down during release, or you'll damage the intricate mechanism of the torpedo. We draw the line at 200 miles an hour, and anybody who flies over it takes his own chances. 200 miles an hour with a limit of 240 for warheads with solid TNT. But exercise heads are filled with water, not so solid, and then you must hold down to 175 with a limit of 200. So, Doug, it boils down to this. You've got a fast airplane and a slow torpedo. Now, speaking of speed, the faster you fly, the more important your attitude is. Remember, the torpedo is mounted so it'll be about level at your average dropping speed. And another thing, you must not skid, slip, or turn. If you fly your torpedo smooth and level at the point of release, the steering gyro will hold the proper course. So if you were to skid, slip, or turn during release, the gyro would stabilize in the wrong position, sending the torpedo on a course you didn't intend. All right, Doug, that takes care of your first big question. How to fly during release. Now let's go back and pick up another torpedo and concentrate on the second question. Where to release? There's one point which often seems confusing, so let's get it straight from the start. The sighting distance to the target at the time of release is not the range. The target will move closer during the time the fish is in the water. So the desired range, say 1,000 yards, must be estimated to the point of impact, not to the target at the time of release. Now, the 1,000 yards the torpedo travels to the target's final position is partly in the air and partly in the water. At 200 miles an hour, dropped from 250 feet, the torpedo will travel about 400 yards in the air. To this figure must be added the 400 yards of water travel necessary to arm the torpedo. Therefore, a 1,000-yard range allows a safety factor large enough to prevent that foolish feeling when a torpedo hits but doesn't go off. Okay, Doug, but that's only half the story of where to release. You've got to aim the torpedo by aiming the airplane. Remember those practice runs you made on the trainer? The aiming problem consists of setting up an airplane course, and thereby a torpedo course, which leads the target. Leads it just enough so that at the end of the 30 seconds it takes a torpedo to cover that 1,000 yards, it will intersect the course of the target at the target. The torpedo director will help in the solution of this problem when you set in known or estimated factors during the run. First, you roll the target speed wheel to the estimated speed. Then, with the latch knob down, pull in the wheel until the arrow arm parallels the estimated course. At the time you're setting this parallel, be sure the target ship is in your sight. Twist the knob up and swing the sight to the rear of the target till it latches. At the same time, turn the airplane until the sight is on the target again. If you've timed the entire process right, you should be at the desired range when you straighten out, for you want to release as soon as possible after the turn. With the airplane stable, not skidding, slipping, or turning, let her go. If you've done things right, you can't miss. But it's sort of hard to tell whether you did or not. That's why a torpedo camera in the nose of your airplane snapped a still picture when you pressed that release. With the negative set up on this assessing equipment, the instructor can show you just how you did. He can figure out, for one thing, where the torpedo hit. Then, most important, he can determine your range. This, together with altitude and airspeed, will tell whether the torpedo would have hit safe or armed. Remember, it's a dud if you don't let it run long enough in the water to arm. And that, again, is 400 yards of water travel. Now, this doesn't tell whether you were yawing or skidding, but your nose was 3 degrees up, about right for a B-26 at dropping speed. Now, suppose your target had been dodging, and in combat, except where you get a lucky break, they'll dodge for all they're worth. Then you do things a bit different than you did for that stationary target. For one thing, you'd go in with your director locked straight forward. You'd estimate lead just like a deflection shot in gunnery. Keep an eye on the target's wake. That's the first giveaway of a dodging turn. For the most part, you're just going to have to guess where he'll be when your fish arrives. So it's a pretty good idea to cut your range down to a minimum, so long as you allow for enough water run to arm the torpedo. You might get away with a range of only 800 yards if you're about 200 feet off the water when you drop. Doug, here's a piece of captured Jap newsreel. You see, they'll do everything they can to mess up an attack. They'll twist and squirm, they'll lay down smoke screens, they'll send up every shell and every fighter they've got. But then, you've got your own bag full of tricks. First of all, you don't go in alone, and you split up to attack from at least 2 angles with coordinated teamwork. You might hide up in the clouds, homing with radar when you have it, and drop down just in time to launch your torpedo. Or you might go in just off the surface of the water, where enemy direction finders are less effective. When one flight can hide in the glare of the sun, so much the better. If these tactics don't catch the enemy asleep, you'd better attack in force. Hit them simultaneously with everything you've got. Fighters to strafe and bother his gunners. Dive bombers to batter his decks. And the big jobs from way up there to pattern bomb. When you all work together, they hammer at him from all sides and from above, while you slip in and deliver that solar plexus punch.